Welcome back. My name is Brian Higgins. I am KPMG's US consulting leader for the manufacturing sector. I'm excited to continue our conversation today around consumer privacy and automotive manufacturers. I'm with my two colleagues and leaders from our cybersecurity practice, Orson Lucas and Caleb Queern. Let's now, after we've sort of covered the broader survey results on the consumer privacy and some of the high-level insights, I want to talk a little bit about the strategies and tactics for actually addressing privacy needs. And Caleb, I'm interested in your perspective here. The study calls out, 81% of US adults concerned about how their data is being used. Talk a little bit about how OEMs are addressing these concerns without compromising on the benefits of connected cars.
We see large OEMs both kind of structurally building up the muscle internally and investing in the programs that will deliver the appropriate consumer outcomes here. I think we also see them investing in technologies that we'll probably get into later that enable some of these outcomes that do the balance between leveraging all of the rich insights in the data that they can collect from vehicles and still keeping consumers pleased with the way their data is being handled.
Orson, what's your thought on how automakers are navigating this complex regulatory landscape, right? There's different jurisdictions that we're wrestling with. There's different laws that we're wrestling with, whether it's GDPR or CCPA, all affecting how data is managed. But how do you navigate that landscape?
Yeah, I think one of the better practices that we see there is developing a cross-jurisdictional framework that's somewhat regulation agnostic, but that ultimately maps back into all of the key regulations that these companies need to comply with, right? So you have something like a GDPR. You have the Latin America, has several regulations that have popped up recently. You have several in Southeast Asia that have also come to pass recently as well. So rather than playing whack-a-mole, right, as these additional regulations come out, having really the centralized framework that maps back into those, this is something that's constantly evolving. Frankly, have new regulators, even in the US, that are really kind of jumping in and trying to get a foothold in this space. I think the other thing I'd highlight that really came out loud and clear in the paper is, beyond just establishing a good framework and having clearly aligned roles and responsibilities that span across, not just the privacy organization, but really the first, second, third line of defense. Being able to measure both adherence to as well as progress against some of these controls and frameworks in more of a data-driven way is something that's really valuable as well. So really establishing some of those key performance indicators early, and then being able to measure and monitor and adapt in areas where you're maybe underperforming is something that's really important as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And one of the things that we talk about in the white paper that you both highlight is this privacy by design and privacy by default. And talk a little bit about what that looks like in the context of automotive manufacturing and how companies are implementing these principles, because it appears it's getting more and more traction, right? These concepts of privacy by design and privacy by default.
Yeah, Brian, I think it's, somewhat surprisingly, right? I think there's an understanding of the concept of privacy by design. So something like 74% of the surveyed respondents, are focusing on customer centricity, which is really heavily impacts, but only about 16% currently employed the privacy by design, privacy by default strategy. So privacy by design is really thinking about privacy as early to the left in the development life cycle, whether it's products, services, et cetera, as possible. So rather than baking in some of these, controls and processes and capabilities after the fact, after maybe a product's been fully designed and is about to go to market, or even after it's been released to market, it's really thinking about that early, engaging with the appropriate teams that are actually developing that product or service. And making sure that you've designed some of those capabilities, but also safeguards or guardrails into the product itself. Privacy by default is a similar concept, but it really starts, it's basically what it sounds like. It means starting from the most, I'll call it protective or most conservative posture in the way that you set some of these settings. So you think about it in an OEM context. If I log into my in-dash navigation system, and by default, the information is to sync my phone, to pull all those contacts and share it out with a third party. That's not really a very privacy respecting kind of setting, at least for a more conservative audience there. The more conservative approach would be to more of an opt-in approach, where the driver or the passenger would have to basically opt in to have all that information collected and shared with the system.
Yeah.
Etc. So yeah.
In sort of building on that data utilization and customer trust kind of theme, Caleb, talk a little bit about that balancing act, right? How automakers balance the drive towards data-driven innovation, which is on the top of everyone's agenda, with the imperative to protect consumer privacy and to build trust.
I think OEMs are facing, among many challenges these days, is how to, of course, they need to compete and win in the market. And among the ways they look to do that is with technology. The hot topic of the day is AI. So they're all asking themselves, how can we deliver more delight among our customers using AI? And the way you get delightful customer experiences with AI is a lot of data. And so that on the one hand, you have a temptation to consume and leverage as much data as possible. On the other hand, you have consumer sentiment around privacy and maybe regulation. So they're navigating that tightrope when we get into all of the nuances that we can collect data and how long we keep data and which data and why. Like that starts to overwhelm customers pretty quickly. But I expect, Brian, that we're going to start seeing in the next couple of years, perhaps, new ways where OEMs present those options to customers, so that there's that perception that OEMs are offering privacy by default, for example.
Yeah, and it's getting more complex, right? So there's an increasing number of third-party integrations in vehicles. Every quarter that clicks by, right? It seems to get more and more complex. And how do automakers ensure that those partners, this growing list of partners, in terms of the third-party integration, services and data collections and things of that nature, how do you manage the privacy standards and ensure that all of your partners are doing the same?
It's not easy, Ryan. I think there's challenges in the way that they manage these third-party relationships, which, there's pretty long and rich histories in most large enterprises of how they engage with their suppliers and the expectations that they put in place for all of them, whether it's security and now privacy we're talking about. That's kind of a well-worn path. Of course, extending it into privacy is a bit newer. One of the unique challenges in the auto space for just about every OEM we can think about is that they are all leveraging dozens or hundreds of suppliers to get a single product out the door. Some OEMs we've seen take more of those parts and pieces and components and bring those in-house. So there's less opportunity for third parties to be a part of the mix of delivering privacy outcomes. So I think we'll see that trend continue over time. It'll take a while for sure, because these are such complex systems, but we see other OEMs doing new things like, and in fact, brand new automakers who are coming out EVs by default, who have the entire manufacturing process in-house. They will have a bit of a competitive advantage in delivering privacy outcomes because it's all in-house from the beginning in the first place.
Yeah.
To your point, Caleb, just to quickly build on that, I think you made a really good point about it being a well-worn path, at least, maybe outside of privacy. That's something that privacy is being slotted into. One of the guiding principles that I see for companies that do third-party risk management really well is thinking about the third parties with whom third-party business partners and vendors, not only as a contractual relationship, but really as a strategic part of their ecosystem. And toward that end, really, working closely with those third parties to make sure that they're doing the right thing at the right time and in coordination with the OEM to make sure that they're reducing that risk as well as providing for a more seamless customer experience as it relates to engaging on privacy.
Yeah, no, it's super useful. And I think that, one related kind of topic, and Kel, you touched on it very briefly, but the paper goes into some level of detail and discusses the need for customer-centric consent mechanisms, right? And, I think it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on, specific examples or use cases that bring that to life a little bit, where have automotive companies innovated in obtaining or managing user consent?
Yeah, I think this is a work in progress by and large. I've seen improvement, and the paper suggests there's more on the way in the UI and the user interfaces, both in mobile apps for car owners or folks who release cars, as well as in the UI of the car itself. I think the more natural and intuitive place that consumers are used to making these decisions is probably on the phone, but it's not. I want to also acknowledge that this is not straightforward. I think the principles are pretty straightforward that automakers are expected to abide by. It's very classic stuff of saying what we're collecting, what it's going to be used for, and how long, etc. But how you make that real among the very long list of data that's available in modern vehicles, especially when we talk about new capabilities in the vehicles that are on the road, whether it's charging behavior, battery life. This gets hairy fast. So I think it's a challenge that OEMs are working through.
Awesome. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Fantastic insights. Great conversation. I want to thank you both for joining me today. For more information, I want to make sure that people understand they can check out the white paper itself, Driving Trust, Consumer Privacy, and Automotive Manufacturers. Many thanks.